Republicans enter the 2026 Senate cycle with a 4-seat lead after flipping 4 seats, along with the presidency last November. That leaves Democrats at a structural disadvantage, and the new map doesn't do them any favors either. Of the 13 seats they're defending in 2026, 2 are in states Donald Trump carried in 2024, Michigan and Georgia. Another 5 Democratic-held seats are in states Kamala Harris carried by less than 10 percentage points: Minnesota, New Hampshire, New Jersey, Virginia, and New Mexico. Meanwhile, Republicans are defending just 1 seat in a state Harris won, Maine, while North Carolina is the only GOP-held seat in a state Trump won by a single-digit margin. Put all that together, and it makes sense why Republicans are clear favorites to hold control of the Senate, according to the prediction market on Kalshi. In today's video, I'm going to fill out the map with my latest predictions, considering each state's partisan lean, incumbency status, recent election results, expert forecasts, and, where available, the latest prediction market odds via Kalshi. Let's start with the obvious. Some seats are safely in each party's column. For Democrats, there's little reason to worry about Oregon, where incumbent Jeff Merkley is seeking a 4th term. Oregon voted for Harris by 14 points in 2024, saw one of the smallest shifts toward Trump nationally, and Merkley won his last 2 races by more than 15 points. The latest odds via Kalshi have Merkley nearly certain to win next November with a 96% chance. As always, I'll leave a link in the description below for you to make your own predictions here as well. So Oregon is our first safe state on the 2026 Senate map. I also expect John Hickenlooper to comfortably win re-election in Colorado, which he said will be his final term in the Senate. First elected in 2020 after 2 terms as governor, Hickenlooper is a strong incumbent, and it should come as no surprise that he is also nearly certain to win with a 96% chance per Kalshi, also benefiting from the fact that Colorado has shifted further to the left than any other state over the past decade. Over in Illinois, longtime Democratic Senator Dick Durbin has announced he won't seek a 6th term, setting off a scramble among several prominent Illinois Democrats eager to capitalize on a rare open seat. Right now, Congressman Raja Krishnamurthy is the favorite, having already raised more than $10 million, and all 3 Democratic primary polls so far give him a double-digit lead. Ultimately, this one should remain safely in the Democratic column regardless of who's nominated. Republicans simply don't have a strong enough candidate to overcome the state's deep blue fundamentals. While Illinois is certainly trending right, Kamala Harris still carried it by 11 points last November, and 2026 is expected to be a more favorable environment for Democrats than 2024 was. Finally, in the Northeast, Massachusetts, Rhode Island, New Jersey, Delaware, and Virginia are all safe Democratic holds, with incumbents expected to run for re-election in each state. New Jersey did trend significantly toward Trump in the 2024 presidential race, but it remains a fundamentally Democratic-leaning state, and incumbent Cory Booker remains very popular. And while Virginia was also decided by a single-digit margin in 2024, incumbent Mark Warner is signaling that he intends to run for a 4th term. In that case, the only factor that could make this race competitive is if outgoing Republican Governor Glenn Youngkin throws his hat into the ring. Right now, Democrats are heavily favored with a 96% chance of winning in New Jersey, and a slightly narrower yet still commanding 92% chance in the Commonwealth of Virginia. It'll be worth paying close attention to the margins in both Virginia and New Jersey's competitive governor races later this year, as they'll offer the first real test of Donald Trump's second-term popularity at the state level. All right, now for the Republicans. There are so many deeply red states on this map, they're barely worth discussing individually. The only retirements we know of so far are Mitch McConnell in Kentucky and Tommy Tuberville in Alabama, who's running for governor, but that won't change much. Kentucky and Alabama remain 2 of the most reliably Republican states in the nation. All told, these 15 solid states bring the Republican total to 47 seats, already just 3 shy of the 50 needed to retain control of the Senate. There is an outside chance that the races in Alaska, Kansas, South Carolina, or Florida could grow more competitive, particularly if 2026 turns into a strong blue wave year and if Democrats can field a competitive candidate. In Alaska, for example, whether or not former Congresswoman Mary Peltola jumps into the race will make or break Democrats' chances. As the only non-baggage family Democrat to win statewide in Alaska in the 21st century, she would immediately push it into likely and maybe even just lean Republican territory. Meanwhile, in Kansas, outgoing Democratic Governor Laura Kelly has made it clear she is absolutely not running for another office, paving the way for Senator Roger Marshall to cruise to a second term, barring a major surprise. In South Carolina, Senator Lindsey Graham is also expected to face a smoother path than he did in 2020, when despite being out-fundraised by Democratic challenger Jamie Harrison, he still won by double digits. And in Florida, as long as newly appointed Senator Ashley Moody secures the GOP nomination, Republicans are in strong shape to hold the seat. Moody has overperformed in both of her statewide races for Attorney General and is widely seen as a formidable general election candidate. That leaves us with just 11 states still without a rating, each of which is either expected to be competitive or carries enough uncertainty that assigning a safe rating at this stage would simply be premature. Before we proceed, let me take this moment to remind you to subscribe to my channel below. It's completely free, and it helps me make more videos like these in the future. Right now, YouTube Analytics is telling me less than 20% of my viewers are subscribed. Again, just hit that button below. It's free. Thanks so much. Alrighty, let's start in New Mexico, one of the 5 Senate seats Democrats are defending in states Kamala Harris carried by single digits in 2024. The incumbent is Ben Ray Lujan, elected to his first term in 2020 with a 6-point win over Republican Mark Ronchetti, who was relatively unknown at the time. However, according to split tickets, wins above replacement score, Lujan underperformed structural expectations by nearly 3 points, suggesting he's not particularly strong as a candidate. That said, without a credible Republican challenger, this seat is still very, very likely to remain in Democratic hands, as Lujan currently has a 93% chance of re-election according to Kalshi. I'm going to go ahead and place New Mexico in the likely blue column on my map. Then there's Texas. The Lone Star State saw the 6th largest Republican swing between 2020 and 2024, with Donald Trump expanding his margin from 5.5 points all the way up to 14. That shift effectively dashed any serious hopes Democrats had of unseating 4-term Republican Senator John Cornyn. But the dynamic has shifted now that Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton has officially launched a primary challenge against Cornyn, setting the stage for a high-stakes clash between the GOP establishment and its hardline conservative base. The two have long been at odds, with Paxton accusing Cornyn of being insufficiently conservative, while Cornyn has pointed repeatedly to Paxton's legal baggage, including his 2023 impeachment by the GOP-led Texas House. So far, neither Donald Trump nor Senator Ted Cruz has endorsed a candidate, with Trump's endorsement being considered critical in deciding the winner of the primary. Paxton had long led Cornyn by wide margins, but that gap has narrowed sharply in recent weeks. According to the Decision Desk HQ average, Paxton sits at 43.4% to Cornyn's 33.8%, less than a 10-point edge, down from nearly 20 just a few months ago. And since Texas holds runoff primaries, if no candidate clears 50%, that scenario is very much in play here. It's also worth noting that Cornyn has a considerable advantage in the money raise, having out-fundraised Paxton by around $5 million, and the incumbent senator has received far more endorsements from his colleagues as well. If Cornyn does survive the primary, he would likely win re-election comfortably, and Texas would stay in the safe Republican column. But if Paxton secures the nomination, the general election outlook will tighten significantly, especially with Colin Allred officially jumping into the race. Allred's candidacy is particularly notable given his strong performance in 2024, when he outpaced Kamala Harris in Texas by 5 points and came within 9 points of unseating Ted Cruz. The prediction markets now rate the primary as a coin flip, with Paxton no longer the clear favorite he once was. That alone carries major implications for the general election. The latest Emerson College poll shows Paxton lagging behind Cornyn in their head-to-head matchups against all red, as Cornyn's lead is 7 points, 45% to 38%, while Paxton's is only 46% to 41%. That trend has also led a downturn for Republicans in the general election market, Kalshi, with their chances now sitting at only 76%, its lowest point yet. For now, Texas remains in the likely Republican column on my map. But if Paxton becomes the nominee, don't be surprised if I shift my rating to lean Republican. Up in Nebraska, Republican Pete Ricketts is running for his first full term in the Senate. He's not especially popular, even within his own party, and the return of independent Cinderella candidate Dan Osborne could pose a serious threat to his re-election prospects. Osborne proved himself a formidable fundraiser in 2024 when he came within 7 points of unseating incumbent Deb Fischer, and where he successfully positioned himself as neither a Democrat nor a Trump-aligned Republican. Right now, Ricketts is still clearly favored with a 76% chance of winning, but an upset isn't out of the question in a strong blue wave environment. For now, it's a likely Republican rating in Nebraska on the map. Right next door in Iowa, Republican incumbent Joni Ernst has officially announced her retirement from the Senate after facing backlash from a comment she made at a town hall back in May. That's not necessarily a bad thing for Republicans, especially with Congresswoman Ashley Hinson emerging as a strong replacement candidate. Trump carried Iowa by 13 points in 2024, the largest margin for either party since Nixon's 49-state landslide in 1972, meaning the GOP nominee would have to dramatically underperform for Democrats to be competitive. Right now, the most likely Democratic nominees are state legislators Josh Turek and Zach Walz, but neither is a knock-your-boots-off kind of candidate. Still, without an incumbent, all three major forecasters have the race in the likely Republican column, and I'm inclined to agree here. The markets have Republicans at slightly lower odds than in Nebraska, and again at their lowest point yet, but I have a hard time seeing them going down any further. Again, you can follow my link in the description to check out these numbers live. And with Iowa, Republicans are already up to 50 Senate seats, enough to hold their majority with Vice President J.D. Vance breaking ties. Next is Minnesota, where Democrat Tina Smith has announced she won't seek a second full term, making this the first U.S. Senate race in the state without an incumbent since 2006. That also happens to be the last time Republicans won a federal election in Minnesota. Lieutenant Governor Peggy Flanagan currently holds the early edge in the Democratic primary, with Congresswoman Angie Craig seen as the next most likely contender. On the Republican side, the most prominent name in the race so far is former NBA player Royce White, but he just lost to Senator Amy Klobuchar by 16 points last November. Unless the GOP manages to recruit a significantly stronger candidate, Flanagan, or whoever emerges as the Democratic nominee, should be favored to win comfortably. Minnesota is another likely state, this time for Democrats. Shifting across the Great Lakes, let's head to Michigan, where Democrat Gary Peters is also stepping down. This one poses more of a challenge for Democrats, given that they narrowly lost Michigan in the 2024 presidential race. And while Democrat Alyssa Slotkin managed to narrowly win the state's open Senate race, she did so by just 20,000 votes over former Republican Congressman Mike Rogers, who is very likely to be the nominee again next November. On the Democratic side, with both Pete Buttigieg and outgoing Governor Gretchen Whitmer declining to run, the party lacks a top-tier name. Congresswoman Haley Stevens, State Senator Mallory McMorrow, and former Wayne County Health Director Abdul El Sayed are headed for a closely contested primary. Stevens has a slight edge when looking at the fundraising and polling numbers, but not by much, as all three candidates are in the double digits and have raised a significant sum of money. That being said, according to Kalshi's Democratic primary market, McMorrow has a slight edge at 41% odds, with Stevens at 37% and El Sayed at 31%, effectively a three-way toss-up. Even while the primary outlook is murky, traders still give Democrats a better than 3 in 4 chance of holding the seats, likely due to an expected favorable environment for Democrats and their tendency to outperform in down ballot races here over the last decade. Personally, I'm less bullish on their chances. As for now, I'm placing Michigan in the tilt Democrat column. Down in Ohio, we're looking at a special election to fill the remainder of the Senate term vacated by Vice President J.D. Vance. Republican Governor Mike DeWine appointed Lieutenant Governor John Husted to the seat, and Husted is now running as an unelected incumbent. If it weren't for former Senator Sherrod Brown running on the Democratic side, I would have expected Husted to cruise re-election, but it's hard to overstate how significant Brown's candidacy is for the Democratic Party. He is the only Democrat to win a major statewide election in Ohio since Barack Obama, and even though he lost his seat in 2024, he overperformed the presidential ticket by 7 points. Had the national environment been just a few points bluer, he very well could have won re-election to a 4th term. And again, considering 2026 is expected to be a more favorable national environment for Democrats, it should come as no surprise that Republican odds have fallen below 70%, with Brown and the Democrats now being given a 1 in 3 chance to pull off the flip. For now, I have Ohio leaning Republican on my map. Let's head up to New England now, where we have 2 uniquely interesting contests. In New Hampshire, Democratic Senator Jeanne Shaheen is retiring, and Congressman Chris Pappas is the first to enter the race to succeed her. At this point, he's likely to remain the most prominent Democrat in the field. Unfortunately for Republicans, former Governor Chris Sununu decided against running, but his older brother, former Senator John Sununu, is reportedly weighing a bid. He lost to Shaheen back in 2008, but is now considered the favorite for the GOP nomination according to Kalshi's odds. If he passes, the likely nominee would then be former Massachusetts Senator Scott Brown. Either Sununu or Brown would be an above-average candidate, but both would still be underdogs against Democrat Chris Pappas, given the state's partisan lean and the expected blue wave. Right now, Kalshi gives Democrats over an 80% chance, aligning with at least a lean Democrat rating on the map. Up in Maine, Republican Senator Susan Collins is a political unicorn. Back in 2020, nearly every poll and analyst predicted her defeat, yet she beat Democrat Sarah Gideon by 8 points, even as Joe Biden carried Maine by 9. To this day, she remains the only Republican to win a Senate race in a state simultaneously carried by a Democratic presidential nominee since 2004. Looking ahead to 2026, Maine is the only Republican-held seat in a state that Kamala Harris won, and it's widely considered Democrats' top pickup opportunity. Their strongest option would have been Congressman Jared Golden, but he declined. That leaves them hoping Governor Janet Mills enters the race, or that Graham Plattner, an oyster farmer endorsed by Bernie Sanders, can sustain his early momentum. Mills is reportedly taking steps toward a run and would bring the highest name ID by far, though some in the party favor an outsider approach, given she'd be 79 upon taking office. For now, Kalshi gives Plattner roughly 50-50 odds at the nomination. With Maine's D+4 partisan lean, a generic Democrat would be expected to win by about 8 points in a neutral environment. Susan Collins has overperformed by that margin before, but her personal approval rating has never been lower. One reason Kalshi's market gives Democrats the edge of a coin flip here. I had previously rated Maine tilt Republican due to Democrats' weak bench, but with 2 potentially strong contenders emerging, I'm flipping it to the Democratic side. This looks like their best chance yet to unseat Collins. Alright, let's wrap things up along the Atlantic coastline with the 2 highest-profile Senate races of the 2026 cycle, North Carolina and Georgia. There's a good chance that when we look back on this election, these 2 contests will define which party enters 2028 with momentum. In North Carolina, Republican Senator Thom Tillis has announced he won't seek a 3rd term. His departure wasn't entirely unexpected. Tillis had long been criticized from his right, censured by his own state's party for his support for LGBTQ+ rights and immigration reform. But what ultimately sealed his time in Congress was his vote against President Trump's Big Beautiful Bill. With Tillis out, President Trump decided to back a candidate more aligned with his style of politics in RNC Chairman Michael Whatley. Without any prior electoral history, it's hard to predict how Whatley will perform in a general election, given his election denialist stance after 2020 and how poorly those kinds of candidates fared in the midterms. There's a real possibility he ends up a below-average contender, which is especially tough considering the presumptive Democratic nominee is Roy Cooper, arguably the strongest non-incumbent in the entire country. He left the governor's office earlier this year with high approval ratings, near universal name recognition across North Carolina, and a powerful fundraising network already in place. Cooper might have even been favored had Tillis stayed in the race, but now, in an open seat race, he starts off as the clear favorite over Whatley. I'm placing North Carolina in the tilt Democrat column. Finally, in Georgia, outgoing Governor Brian Kemp's decision not to run for Senate was, at the time, the worst news Republicans received all cycle. Kemp, much like Roy Cooper in North Carolina, is a popular, battle-tested leader in a politically competitive state. He would have been the strongest possible Republican to challenge Democratic Senator Jon Ossoff, and might even have been favored to flip the seat, despite Ossoff's considerable strengths as a candidate. Ossoff made history in 2020 by defeating incumbent David Perdue in a high-stakes runoff, and has since built a formidable political brand and fundraising machine. Without Kemp, Republicans lack a clear top-tier alternative. Congressman Buddy Carter and Mike Collins are the most prominent names to enter the race so far, but neither candidate is particularly well-positioned to compete at the scale this race demands. In fact, the general public is so low on those potential nominees that Ossoff now has a better than 75% chance to win re-election on Kalshi, after having previously been the underdog. It's also important to note that while much of the country swung sharply to the right between 2020 and 2024, Georgia and North Carolina did not. Both states are experiencing gradual demographic shifts that continue to benefit Democrats, expanding, diversifying metro areas, and a steady influx of college-educated transplants from traditionally blue regions in the Northeast and West. Put it all together, and Jon Ossoff now holds a clear edge in what was once shaping up to be the GOP's best flip opportunity of the cycle. So with all that said, we land at a projected 51 to 49 seat majority for the Republicans. This is my narrowest prediction yet, down from 52 to 48 in my last update, as Democrats pick up 2 seats here in Maine and in North Carolina. That's just my current read based on where the national environment and candidate dynamics stand today. But of course, it's still early. The map can and will shift. That's it for today's video. Huge thanks to my channel members, all listed in the description. Don't forget to hit subscribe and drop a like if you enjoyed the content. Check out more videos here, and as always, thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time. EP out.